Well, we're out in the woods. It's dark. And the fire is burning. So why not talk about a horror movie? House is a horror/comedy movie that came out in 1985, but is often credited as being a 1986 movie. This probably has to do with the fact that it came out initially on December 31st, 1985, but had its wider release in February of 1986. The movie is about Roger, a Vietnam War vet who has now become a very successful horror author. When his aunt passes away, he makes the decision to move into her house in order to get some solitude so he can focus on working on his new book. A house that his aunt was convinced was haunted. And of course, shortly after Roger moves in, he begins to experience odd things. Now, I don't want to talk about the plot too much, just in case you haven't seen it. It is available on Amazon Prime Video, and it is worth the watch if you enjoy movies from that decade. I feel like the 80s especially have this very specific feel when it comes to horror movies. And more often than not, nowadays, you either love it or hate it. Now, is House a good movie? No, but it's not necessarily a bad movie either. It's a little bit of an oddity. For 1985, it's a decent mix of campy horror and pretty decent humor, although by today's standards, this movie would be considered an all-out comedy, which honestly doesn't hurt it in my opinion. This was a movie I used to watch with my dad when I was a kid, and it's the kind of movie that just makes you laugh out loud at how ridiculous it is. Maybe that was the point. Or maybe I just have really fond memories of it and it actually is really bad. It's really hard to say when it comes to talking about movies from my childhood. I'm not familiar of any of the cast outside of the actor who plays Roger's neighbor. He was in Cheers, and he was actually pretty funny in this movie. He plays nosy, concerned, and deadpan so well that every single scene he's in is enjoyable. Sort of like the token character in any cartoon sitcom. The movie does feel a little bit messy when it comes to its true horror parts. It leans heavily into Roger's PTSD from being in the war and something specific that happened between him and one of his buddies during his time there. And it is a little jarring to see those sorts of scenes immediately following a scene where Roger is fighting, well, basically a troll. It's very typical 80s cheesy horror. Do you know what I mean? The rubber suits that they used for monsters, and everything is very well lit, so nothing is left to the imagination. Now that I think about it, that's probably why my dad was okay with me watching this movie at such a young age. It's very similar to stuff that you would see in movies like The Dark Crystal, just a little cheaper. It works fine here, so long as the filmmakers weren't actually going for genuine scares. I don't think audiences of today would see anything of quality here. A campy horror movie that just so happens to stick out to me because I watched it a bunch years ago. Yes, it gets a little heavy-handed when it comes to the war sequences, but at least they're tied into the actual plot of the movie. Just don't expect a lot of it to be explained or make sense. It's a movie where the phrase, "it is what it is," perfectly applies. It's easy to recommend this movie to people who like cheesy, campy horror movies specifically like this, but for everybody else, you're probably just gonna scoff at it. But who knows? Maybe give it a shot on Halloween with your kids. There isn't any excessive violence in it, or sex, or language for that matter. I think maybe one F-bomb. So that being said, it's kind of the perfect movie to sort of ease your little ones into the horror genre and traumatize everybody. Hey, it worked on me. So what about you? Have you seen House? Are you one of the people that enjoy this movie? If you are, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next one.